The Bechele project, Servo Calibration. As a very first step, make sure your joystick is calibrated correctly. To do the first servo calibration, this is the servo type determination. Open config.l PM and set the field servo limit start and servo limit end to a default of 150 and 700 of the servo you want to calibrate. This should roughly fit for the majority of servos at 50 Hz PWM frequency. For rare servo types or for different frequency, you may increase the range carefully. Then save and quit config.l.pm. Theoretically, you could set it to 0 and 4096, but then usually the sensitivity of the adjustment is extremely high, so it is hard to set the joystick. Then connect only one servo that is not inside your model. Connect the servo to the PWM PCB onto the port you just configured in your config.l.pm. Then put the joystick to the middle and run servo calib-single.pl. If the configured servo is not the first in the array, you can move the control to the desired servo by pressing the joystick button forward or back. Once you are at the right servo, move the joystick X slowly to the left. The servo should move. Move until you reach the maximum position of the servo. Make sure to keep a little distance to the mechanical internal stop of the servo, so the servo does not block itself. Read the value servo 1 and note the value. This becomes later the parameter servo limit start. Now move the joystick X right until the servo almost reaches the opposite limit. Once you figured out the limit, note it as servo limit end. Quit the program with Ctrl+C and open config.l PM again. Enter the determined values into the appropriate fields, save and quit. Now open servo calib-single.pl again. Toggle to the desired servo using the joystick buttons and move your joystick to the limits left and right. Your servo 1 field should show the limits you just entered. This means for the second servo calibration, you cannot get beyond the servo type limits, which makes it easier to find the values for the second servo calibration. If you use the same servo type all over your model, you can take over the limit values from the first calibration step for all servos you want to configure. If you use different servo types, determine and set the referring values accordingly. Each servo definition set in the array has its own limit fields. For the second servo calibration step, you need to mount the servo into your model. Put the joystick to the position where your servo is in a movable area. Then start servo calib-single.pl again, toggle to the desired servo and carefully move the joystick left until you reach the maximum position your servo can move without hitting against a mechanical block inside the model. Note this value as servo start. Then move the joystick right until you reach the opposite point just before the mechanical block inside the model. Note this value as servo end. The noted numbers define the movement limits for this particular servo. Leave the program with Ctrl+C. Now enter the determined values into the appropriate fields of the servo array in your config.l.pm. Note: the fields servo start and servo end have no effect to the calibration programs servo calib-pl and servo calib-single.pl, but these limits are used in trackue.pl and live.pl. Furthermore, the array fields servo limit start and servo limit end have no effect in trackue.pl and live.pl, but in servo calib-pl and servo calib-single.pl.